Coming up, it's at the center of so many of our debates these days. There it is right there. It's the U.S. Constitution. Is it perhaps the problem and not the solution? Our Brain Trust is going to debate that issue straight ahead. First, though, well, the White House may take a broader approach to gun control than previously thought. According to the Washington Post, the working group that's being headed by Vice President Joe Biden is seriously considering a number of measures recommended by law enforcement, among them including requiring universal background checks for gun buyers, a national database to track weapons sales, strengthening mental health checks, and stiffer penalties for carrying firearms near schools. I want to go ahead and bring in the Brain Trust right now. Aisha Moody Mills from the Center for American Progress Action Fund, syndicated columnist Bob Franken. Bob, good to see you back as well.
Good to see you.
Boris Epstein, contributor for the Daily Caller and USnews.com. Thanks to all of you for coming in on a Sunday. Boris, let me start with you. What kind of a fight is the White House going to have on its hand over these measures?
There is going to be a fight, but I, as a Republican, would say that we would be better off to work with the White House on this. This is a bipartisan issue for two very important reasons. One, we've definitely seen an uptick in this gun violence, and it is awful. Two, it's obvious the president got reelected. The majority in the Senate is Democratic. For us, the Republicans, to pick a fight on this would mean to use some chips that are better used on the economic issues. These things that were just listed, mental health checks, background checks, these are things that I'm in favor of, and a lot of moderate Republicans are in favor of. It is something that's almost necessary in the world we live in today, when guns are more accessible than they used to be.
This is Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell from Meet the Press this morning, Bob and Aisha. I want you to take a listen to what he says about the possibility that gun rights won't even be on the congressional agenda for months. Take a listen.
What we need to do first is see what the Vice President's group comes up with, what their recommendations are. There'll be plenty of time to take a look at their recommendations once they come forward. What's going to dominate Washington for the next 3 months here is going to be spending and debt.
Bob, have Republicans underestimated the outrage in this country over what happened in Newtown, Connecticut?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that the Democrats and the administration may be overestimating their ability to overcome the gun lobby. To be very bluntly honest about it, I think that Joe Biden promising the Boston mayor that there would be a package that was out and on the president's desk by January, by the end of January, raises my question of what year are we talking here? This is not something that's going to go easily. What could happen, though, is that the president, through executive order, could make some of these things actually occur. So I suspect that we will see a package, but Senator McConnell is probably right. It's going to be quite some time before Congress does anything meaningful, if it ever does.
Aisha, is the NRA, is it as powerful as it would have a lot of folks to believe?
You know, the question becomes, is the NRA actually representing its members, is the first question I would ask. You know, what we do know, and Boris hit this on the head when he just said this, is that the vast majority of gun owners, 90% of gun owners, 90% of the members of the NRA absolutely believe that some kind of stricter gun regulation that keeps guns and firearms out of the hands of people who could be harmful is a good thing. And so the question becomes, who is the NRA actually representing? And at the end of the day, it's profiteers. It's the gun lobby that are people who are padding their pockets with selling those weapons, and those are the people that Mitch McConnell are beholden to. And no, they are not. The last election has proven that they are not as powerful as folks would have us believe. What we know is that only something like 1% of the millions of dollars that they invested in races went to campaigns that actually won.
I haven't seen you, Boris, since the NRA had that bizarre press conference where they called for armed guards at schools. Do you think that is that even where we should start? Should that be a part of the conversation?
It should be part of the conversation. It's something that's important to have, because you're seeing a lot of this gun violence in schools when shooters are coming in armed, and there really is only one way to battle that. And if it's an armed guard, if it's either a police officer,
but is it a 64-year-old retired police officer who's down in the gym? Like, I mean, but is that a real?
No, it's got to be someone who's specifically trained, and also you don't need to have one blanket policy for everywhere in the country. Look at some schools that may be more in danger, but as you saw in Newton, that's an upper class area. You wouldn't necessarily think that's somewhere where something like this would happen. So that is part of the conversation, but everything else is too. Something that's very important is they're taking a look at that loophole where folks who buy guns at gun shows don't need to submit to background checks. Walmart and entities like that will likely be in support of cutting out that loophole. So people buy guns at stores, therefore going through background checks.
All right.
That's a good thing.
We're going to continue this conversation not not today, but this is not going to be an issue that we let die. Stay right there, guys. We have been talking about guns in the Second Amendment as well, but we want to take a step back. And we also want to spend some time talking about scrapping the Constitution altogether. Not my idea, but this is an idea that has been floated by a really smart guy. In fact, he taught at your law school, Boris Epstein. This is MSNBC, the place for politics. All right, we've been talking about guns and constitutional rights with the Brain Trust. Aisha Moody Mills from the Center for American Progress Action Fund, syndicated columnist Bob Franken, and Boris Epstein, contributor for the Daily Caller and USnews.com. One legal scholar, Bob Franken, says that maybe we should scrap the Constitution. Georgetown law professor Louis Seidman, Dr. Seidman, writing recently in the New York Times, quote, "Our obsession with the Constitution has saddled us with a dysfunctional political system, kept us from debating the merits of divisive issues, and inflamed our public discourse." Have constitutional restrictions paralyzed the process of governing, Bob Franken?
Well, Dr. Seidman will be so proud of me because I'm going to quote James Madison from Federalist Paper 51, who said, "You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself." And that is the beauty of the Constitution. That is to say, it protects against the tyranny of the majority, as John Adams said and then de Tocqueville said, and in fact makes it more difficult, on the one hand, to get things done, hence his complaint about dysfunctional government. On the other hand, it stops bad things from being done. It is a unique document in that it provides for a balance of power, and it does slow things down, but it has also guaranteed a stability and an ability for the United States to thrive ever since it went into effect.
There is one phrase, Aisha, that comes up in constitutional arguments frequently. Professor Seidman writes, quote, is this idea that the framers, what would the framers have done? That's a frequent question. Is it counterproductive to run the government on what a lot of folks might have thought some 250 years ago?
You know, we certainly don't need to get rid of the Constitution. What we actually need to do is enforce the Constitution. The First Amendment explicitly prohibits states, for example, from seeking to silence voices that they don't agree with. And that's exactly what we've seen happen over the last couple of years. You've got a gerrymandering system that's happening in the states where districts are being created to really silence Democratic votes and make sure that those votes are meaningless, quite frankly. And that's why we have the mess that we have in Congress, because we have a majority that is made up of Republicans in Congress, even though in the last election, Democrats received something like 1.4 million more votes in general.
In the House. Yeah, in the House.
In the House. So how is it that if Democrats are receiving more votes in the House, the power dynamic is flipped? I mean, if we were upholding the Constitution, we wouldn't see that happening.
Bob, Boris, do you think that the Constitution itself, should it be a living, breathing document? Should it evolve as our society has evolved?
To a degree, yes, and it was written that way. That's why there are 4 ways in the Constitution where it can be amended and expanded and changed. So
none of which are possible, by the way.
Well, there's 27, right? So it has been done and been done recently in the 1990s. There was an amendment passed, and I disagree with Professor Seidman on that, even though he is a Georgetown law professor. I'm a proud Georgetown law graduate. But having said that, the whole idea of scrapping the Constitution is completely impractical. He writes in there that we still need such things as the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, but those should be held up out of a respect, but not out of necessities. We've seen, if you look at just the 20th century, what happens when governments suspend their constitution. It is not a pretty sight. You're talking about fascist Germany, fascist Italy. You're talking about Egypt, and even most recently, what happened with Egypt, when Morsi said he's going to suspend the Constitution and take all the rights for himself. People went out in the street. That should not happen in America. We do not have a broken system to that degree.
Bob, the Electoral College is a product of the Constitution. Is that just one more example of an out-of-date 18th century document ruling a 21st century nation? I mean, why we can't even do direct voting in this country?
Well, you know, James Madison, once again, it's James Madison Day here on MSNBC, is the one who argued in favor of the representational democracy as opposed to the direct democracy, for the same reasons that we've already discussed. You have to worry about the passions, to use the word that was used in the Fed papers, the passions of the moment that in fact could take away liberties. The Electoral College is one example of that. Probably that should be revisited, but this whole concept of representatives as opposed to a direct kind of vote is what is fundamental to the Constitution. It's particularly important these days when we debate the possibility that all things could be decided by an internet vote. That could be kind of chaotic.
All right, stay right there, guys. Up next, calling all ladies. We're going to start with you, Aisha, since you are the only lady here. Both parties aggressively searching for women candidates to run for president. We are going to go through the lineup after this. Back with the Brain Trust, Aisha Moody Mills, Bob Franken, Boris Epstein. Let's talk about women here. Politico today reporting that the Democrats are already looking for the right woman to run in 2016. Who do you think? Who do you each think is the right woman, Democrat or Republican, for 2016? Aisha, I'm going to start with you here.
Well, the good news is that we've got several, and that's what's exciting about this so-called Year of the Woman with record numbers of women.
I thought last year was the Year of the Woman. So is this the Year of the Woman, too?
2012, we had some exciting victories, yes. I'm looking forward to seeing if Kirsten Gillibrand from New York, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand jumps in it, or if Senator Amy Klobuchar jumps in it from Minnesota.
That's the one that you don't hear a lot of, Amy Klobuchar. You just pull one kind of out of right field there.
Well, both of them are awesome, are absolutely awesome candidates in terms of their values. I think that they both have a lot to offer. They're young, they're fresh, they can raise money. So we'll see.
Boris, how about you?
Well, I'll do one from the opposite team first.
Okay.
I think Kathleen Sebelius is a name that needs to be watched. Successful governor in Arkansas and Kansas, has done well also in the cabinet. So she's someone, and clearly partisan for the Democrat line. From the Republicans, I think we're looking at someone like a Nikki Haley.
Really?
Young.
Have you ever talked to someone who lives in South Carolina about Nikki Haley?
Well,
her approval rating outside the Palmetto State is considerably higher than it is there in South Carolina.
But she's obviously done well. She's the governor, and she is generally liked around the country. And also, she is the kind of Republican I think we're looking for, in that she is not overly conservative, and she would gather the party behind her.
She's pretty conservative. I think she's a Tea Party favorite.
But she's a Tea Party favorite, but it also appeals to the moderate, the business Republicans, which is where I stand.
Aisha, you think Nikki Haley is that? I mean, is that someone that?
My whole entire family lives in South Carolina, and I don't know anybody who likes Nikki Haley that's in South Carolina. My whole family's in South Carolina, and I don't know a lot of folks who think really highly of her in the way that she's talked about on a national level.
But what about all those voters who vote for her in South Carolina?
That was a long time ago. Yeah. There have been some issues in the Palmetto State, especially most recently.
There have been a lot of issues.
Especially most recently with the identity theft crisis and the way that was handled. So anyway, Bob, how about you?
I think she's going to
my pick. I get it. Neither of you like my pick.
Well, first of all, a correction. Klobuchar would be pulling somebody from left field.
That's true.
Secondly, I have a binder full of women.
Wow, Bob's really funny today. I really like that.
Indeed. And here's what I would love to see. I would like to see Kelly Ayotte, who is the Republican senator from New Hampshire, run against Jeanne Shaheen, the Democrat from New Hampshire. And we could just let the 12 people who live in New Hampshire decide it. So the first primary would be the last. Simple, right? Maybe a few flaws, but what do you think?
Over in January of 2000.
Yeah, but we'll have a conversation at some other juncture, Bob, about the role that places like Iowa and New Hampshire, the role they have in our electoral process, because one could argue that their role is a bit outsized.
But as small states, going back to the Electoral College argument, small states do play an important role, and that's where the Electoral College comes in, because it gives an equal voice to those states.
Yeah, but is the voice equal, or is the voice perhaps a little louder?
Well, and another comment about Nikki Haley, there are many people who would say that any candidate who doesn't have a high approval rating in South Carolina might be okay.
You know what, Bob Franken, I can't let you sit here and dog my home state like that. But we're all going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. So, Aisha Moody Mills, Bob Franken, Boris Epstein, thank you so much for your time and insight. Absolutely. And a big thanks to you as well. That's going to do it for us today. Keep it right here, though, on MSNBC.